Well, it is 7:30, so I think I'll move to to like saying welcome to all of you, and I'm sure a few more people will join us as we go. And yeah, so this is the fourth and final installment of this really fascinating series of forest gardens and well-being, and how the two speak to each other and can work well together. It's been brilliant already, and so what we want to do today is kind of celebrate what's already happening and what we've already seen, look at the wider context of it, and also look ahead a bit and think ahead and kind of saying, where does this leave us? Where do we go? Where can we go with this as a community of forest gardeners and of people passionate about forest gardening together? So what have we lined up for today? After this introduction, I will hand over to Nickie, who's got a great presentation prepared just to remind us of some of the highlights that we've already seen, or people who haven't managed to catch everything. They will just get a nice overview of what's happened so far. That'll be the first 10 minutes or so, and then after that we'll get wildly interactive. So we are sharing a Jamboard, which is a technology some of you might know, some not, and we'll explain it. And it's fairly intuitive, actually. So you'll learn a bit of tech here as well. But the point of it is to gather questions that arise from what's happened so far, like about how we can usefully connect forest gardens and well-being and create synergy there. Having done that, we will have a team of like people consisting of Paul, Richard, possibly Hannah, beavering away and kind of looking at all those questions that have arisen, putting them into a shape, while I do a bit of entertainment and like forest garden, like do a bit of framing around forest gardening and well-being and the principles that we've developed that we're recommending for working with forest gardens. Once that's happened, there'll be questions ready for us to discuss in breakout groups, and then afterwards breakout groups will come back, summarize their discussion, and then we'll look at what next steps we might take together or individually in the direction of kind of connecting these themes. So that's, and then it's going to be 9 o'clock, and hopefully, kind of we'll all go out with kind of a new inspiration and understanding and connection. That's the general idea. With that introduction finished, I'll hand straight over to Nickie, and please, kind of give us a bit of a review of what we've seen so far.
Okay, so I just set this up. Okay, so I'm just going to see if I can do that. Okay, yeah. And so brilliant. Welcome everybody. So I'm just going to go through about some of the things that we've heard, both from our speakers, but also what you've told us. And what we've done is we've pulled out various 2 or 3 very broad themes that have come across through the work that you've done on the Jamboard, the feedback that we've received, and the conversations that we've had with you. So first of all, I'd just like to think back to seminars and the speakers that we've had and think about the things that we've learned and the things that have been shared with us. I think going back 4 weeks ago now, we heard stories about a green social prescribing related by both Elizabeth and Edward, the GP. And it was kind of wonderful, really, to hear about the personal impact that some life experiences had on Edward, and the way he shared those with us, and how that was a real motivator to get green social prescribing up and going in his practice. And that was I felt that was quite inspirational. We heard about the direct health impact of spending time immersed in nature, both alone and with others. And that came through from a number of the speakers that we heard and a number of our conversations. We told stories about the social connection that developing forest gardens creates when we work together. We heard about the direct health impacts of eating healthy foods grown in our forest gardens, as described by Elizabeth. And we heard stories from Carol and Beth about how they developed their gardens. And we listened to stories that they shared about patients that had been involved and had experiences in their garden. We listened to a story about a patient with renal problems, and also a patient with diabetes, and an end-of-life patient, and how they'd found a sense of well-being and a calm and serenity and connection by spending time in the hospital gardens, the forest gardens that have been created. And we also heard a bit about the impact, this was particularly from Beth, the impact on staff of being able to escape from the wards and the busy environment of the hospital, and to go and get some headspace in the garden during their lunch breaks, and how that allowed them to feel replenished and rejuvenated, able to get a bit of headspace and just spend time being before going back and being a bit more available to the patients that they were working with on the wards. And lots of you told us about your experience and your sense of well-being by spending time in nature. Connecting with nature and connecting with each other were strong themes that came throughout the seminars and throughout the discussions that you seem to be having in your breakout rooms. And it came across from Kay, who spoke to us about the scientific underpinning of nature connection, and why that gives us a sense of well-being, and that really we're hardwired to feel good in nature, particularly in woodlands. And we learned how forest gardens in particular meet all of the sensory elements that make us feel good. And we learned how we can specifically use design to enhance the well-being impact of our forest gardens. And we heard about lots of enthusiasm for developing forest gardens in healthcare settings. It seems that the links between low maintenance, sustainable food growing and the social ethos that goes with forest gardens and the experience of well-being that creates seems to have really captured our imagination. And that seems to have developed a kind of drive for wanting to develop forest gardens in healthcare settings, but not just healthcare settings, in many community settings. We feel the benefit. So what have we talked about? I'm going to just draw out some themes that came out of the breakout rooms. So we've looked at all of the information that you put on the Jamboard, and we've grouped that information into broad themes. I mean, probably the overarching theme, of which there are then sub-themes that fit into this, but the overarching theme is conversations about realising the potential of forest gardens, exploring ways to realise the potential of forest gardens in healthcare settings. Whether these were conversations about exploring the practicalities of how to get forest gardens started and sustained, or just more broadly sharing your stories and those of people you know who have experienced the health and well-being benefits of community gardens and community gardening, so the actual activity as well as just experiencing being in the environment, that particularly including forest gardens. And then there are some broad common themes within this overarching theme that you were talking about. So ownership, and this had multiple facets to it. So perhaps the most practical one that came through was ownership of the land. So who owns the land? Who owns the development of the garden? And how do we balance between owning the land, accessing the land, having stewardship for the land, and how do we balance what was sometimes described as tensions between those different facets towards land ownership? And then another theme that sort of sits under the term ownership was really around people and project development. Project, process and people, I've described that as. We heard about projects where there'd been a deliberate attempt to draw in and involve and sustain the involvement of people from a diverse range of backgrounds, people that we might think are more difficult to make these projects accessible to. So Beth told us about a project that she was running in an elderly care home, and it was an intergenerational project where there are both children from local schools engaging with the elderly patients, elderly clients that were living in the residential homes. And so we heard about a number of these projects. Another thing that came through in one of the breakout rooms was a project that had involved Syrian refugees, where they were particularly helped through some of the post-traumatic stress that some of them were experiencing. And they were grown vegetables and fruit and plants from the area that they came from in Syria. And that was really helping them to feel more at home in their local community. So we heard about projects that were really in very practical ways, drawing in communities that sometimes are more difficult to help to engage in this kind of work. And we want to be able to do that well. There was lots of talk about wanting to really make our activities involving as diverse a range of people as possible and trying to work out how we can do that well. We talked about flattening hierarchies, creating committees, distributing leadership, and thinking about how we can involve as diverse a range of people as possible with forest gardens and forest gardening. So that was quite a strong theme that came through about how can we do this bit well. So I think influencing and persuading was probably the next biggest theme, and that again can be broken down into various groups of people and organisations that people were wanting to influence, get on board, help them to get a project off the ground, help them keep a project sustainable. So GPs and healthcare workers were particularly talked about, particularly in relation to social prescribing. Not surprisingly, landowners. How can we get landowners to buy into what we're trying to do? Public services. So there was talks about councils and local charities, and again, influence and persuading different communities. That links back to the what I was saying before. There was talk about different BAME communities, and there was talk about elderly. There was talk about more disadvantaged communities, which are perhaps the people that will benefit most from the health and well-being impacts of forest gardening, access to green space. And then there was a lot of talk about funders. So this is really, a lot of this is around stakeholder engagement and how do we do that well and how do we make that work for us? I mean, there was some talk from our speakers about how they've done that effectively and made it work. And then there was a lot of talk and stuff in the Jamboards about challenges, but also some solutions as well. So perhaps the final theme is connecting and networking. And really this connecting and networking, although it came through as a separate theme, but this in itself connects with everything else that we've talked about. So it interlinks with all the other themes that we've talked about. So really this was about strengthening our cause by working and partnering with other organisations. And there was a whole diverse range of organisations that were spoken about on the Jamboard, from councils, some related charities, so mental health charities, organisations that were involved with farming or food, or there was permaculture was specifically mentioned, other health charities, organisations such as, let me have a think. So they talked about Mind, the Permaculture Association, councils and public health bodies, other health organisations like the Heart Association or Age UK. All of those kinds of organisations were suggestions for people and places that we can collaborate with, that may help us and support us in both getting these projects off the ground, but keeping them running and helping us maybe connect with a different range of people. And then another big thing that came through was networking with other forest gardeners, people that have already done this, but just a way of sharing ideas and connecting and supporting with each other. So I think those were the main themes that came through. Yeah, so I think now it's a thank you to everybody for taking part so far, and back over to Thomas.
Right. So yeah, thank you very much, Nickie. So there's it's been great to be reminded of like a lot of the stuff that we've covered, you know, and the richness that came through in all that. Yeah, I think for that alone, it's really been worth just like putting this seminar series together. But as forest gardeners, you know, kind of never, never afraid to kind of like try to get another yield out of the situation, you know. So let's see what else can we harvest, you know. And so one thing that, you know, kind of we've got like 40 people here with curiosity, with their own perspectives, with their ideas, and so let's harvest some of that curiosity. And so what will happen next is that Paul, I believe, will share a Jamboard. So that will go into the chat. And so if you click on that link that Paul will share in a moment, go to that Jamboard, and Paul will do a little bit of a 101 on how to use that. Basically, it's in the simplest way, you can stick post-it notes with questions and thoughts on there, and then they will be covered. And so what you put on these post-it notes are your questions around the theme of how do we use forest gardens in health and well-being in healthcare settings to their fullest potential. So that's the overarching question. And any questions that come under that, in between that, like how we might be able to go about that, put them on a post-it note, stick it on, and then yes, and so we let that run for maybe 10 minutes, and kind of if nothing comes to you straight away, that's okay. Somebody else will no doubt jump in, and then just by seeing other people's questions, that might lead you to your own exploration. So I hope that is clear. Brilliant. Okay, so when this is all feels nice and rich. So while a few more questions are still coming in, I'll say what happens next. So in this next phase, Paul and Richard and Hannah will get together and we'll have a good look over all these questions and start to group them into themes, and so hopefully like some clear themes will be emerging. And then in about, we give them about 15 minutes, say, and at the end of that, they'll come back and we see what themes emerge, and then each one of us can choose to join a particular theme and then start working into that and like trying to find ideas that might help us answer those questions. And that will happen in breakout groups, and you can choose your own breakout group that relates to a particular theme. Paul will explain that in a bit more detail when we get to that point. So thanks for playing so far. And one thing I guess is worth saying is that so we are developing a whole process of participation here as well. So so some of it might feel a bit rough around the edges, and we're clearly experimenting together here, but I hope you can bear with that process and find that process even enjoyable, like developing new ways of communicating together, and evolving our ideas around forest garden and their usefulness together. So thank you for that so far. And so I'll hand all that over with great confidence to my colleagues, while I'll be here to entertain you in the meantime. So what I've prepared is another way of looking at forest gardens and well-being through the lens of the principles that we co-developed at the previous stage for forest garden. Hold on. And just also throw into the mix a couple of other concepts that speak to the same theme, same overall theme. So forest gardens for well-being, that's what we've been looking at for the last 4 weeks. So many of you will be familiar, I guess, with the concept of the 5 ways to well-being. If you're not, the New Economics Foundation were the people developing this theme, and it's a great, quite a powerful framework to think about what well-being is and how it can be created, and on different levels. So I've put together the 5 different theme headings that they've identified, and an image to go with that based on people's forest garden practice, just to illustrate that forest gardening really can help us work on all of these themes. If we're thinking about forest gardening as physical, gentle physical activity in the open air with other people, so then that already ticks a lot of those boxes that are that we've got here in front of us. If we're thinking about forest gardening in public spaces and community spaces as a two-way exchange of giving time, giving attention, giving connection, and at the same time receiving, learning together with other people and from other people, and all of those things manage to kind of improve and kind of maintain well-being on the individual and on the community level as well. So that's one framework that is like widely used in society to understand well-being. We've developed our own framework in terms of like how do we talk about forest gardens in the public realm, you know, and kind of like how do we get ideas across. So I'll share a few images about that and stories about that, and each slide speaks to one of these principles. So the first one, and possibly the most obvious one, is think diversity. You know, forest gardens really are like as a space, an embodiment of diversity in the plant kingdom, in like the animals that interact with it, the fungal life underneath. So the whole diversity of life, they're present in one like compact system, and that diversity is great to like basically often mirrored in the way that people interact with the space and with each other. So here's a few images of one of the like most inspiring forest gardens I've come across in Seattle in North America. And so if you're looking at these images, like one thing it tells you is that there are, like in terms of diversity, there's more than one way of being useful, of contributing to a space, and that all those contributions are worth appreciating, you know. So, and not everybody necessarily has time to like get stuck into day-to-day regular maintenance and like building up a space, you know. But even just coming to an open day and giving some views, giving some ideas, some appreciation, you know, so that is already a contribution, you know, and that helps to keep the whole thing going. Or harvesting, you know, like forest gardens are there to be harvested, so appreciating that kind of people make use of it, you know. And like taking the kids out and like playing or learning with them, you know, all those things are like valuable in themselves and of themselves. And another consideration around diversity is that diversity is what makes connection possible, you know. So if we're thinking about like a forest garden that attracts only or like supports only a narrow social range of people, you know, then that's not going to have the same beneficial effect as something that is more open and like involves and invites people. And that doesn't have to be in a formal way necessarily, just by having it as an open space, you know, that can happen. So the next principle is called observe and interact. And I mean, this is one of my favorite Chinese characters. So observation, kind of as humans, you know, can be using 90% be using our eyes, but actually in terms of observing, especially in like interaction among people, our ears and the space between them are probably as important, if not more so. And listening is like the key skill here. And yeah, kind of, if you kind of put this character together and reconstruct it, then like if I listen, I give my undivided attention to you with my eyes, ears, and heart, you know. And I think that is that's an embodiment of really like an open relationship that sets us up for interaction then. And so thinking about the interaction bit of this principle, I think we often forget that cooperation is a skill, and a skill can be learned, you know. And very often people will have blanket statement of saying either, yeah, I'll do that all the time, or it doesn't work, or I can't do it, you know. And so the truth is somewhere between those extremities, you know. So the truth is that all of us collaborate and communicate a lot of the time without necessarily realizing it. And by giving attention to how we do it and how other people do it and how people want to be interacted with, we can develop our own skills, you know, and that's a never-ending lifetime process, really. So observing an interaction, that is, yeah, it's an encouragement to listen and to like work on collaboration. Oh, I'm going the wrong way now. The next principle is I've taken a little bit of liberty here in that kind of the original phrasing was decide your group structure together, but I decided to slightly rephrase that because it's not just about the structure, it's about the process as well. And if we're thinking about like the shape of a tree is an expression of the process of a tree, is the process of sap flow from the leaves to the roots and from the roots to the leaves, year in and year out, you know. So a tree is a physical embodiment of a process, of a long ongoing lifetime process. And if we're thinking about our groups and our forest gardens as similar, of our projects as similar embodiments of a process, of a social process, I think then we're getting somewhere really interesting. And if we're not just looking at the individual tree, but a group of trees, you know, so like if you're looking at up into the crown, you see how the different trees also shape each other, you know, so like not people are not individuals as islands, groups are not working in an empty space, you know, there's always a context that we're interacting with and that we're taking up some space and kind of growing into each other's spaces. So I think there are some interesting lessons we can take from looking at how trees grow individually and together for the way we grow individually and together. And so looking at like how people work together in a forest garden is one thing, but then also looking at what happens beyond, you know, and so looking beyond the edge of our project, our own ideas as well. And that can be physical. So here's a forest garden being made in Kassel, in a like busy part of a like big German city. But it can also be conceptual edges and like our expectations or our ideas of like who can be or should be involved in the projects, you know. And I mean, what I love about this particular project is that it was given an inner city space, and that was already being used by homeless people. And so from the council point of view, there was a little bit of an undertone of social cleansing going on there. But the people running this project made a conscious decision actually to involve the homeless people in the creation of the forest garden and give them some, you know, so basically have a conversation with them, like what the space means to them and kind of how the space can be theirs as well, and like giving some value to a space to people who usually are not consulted, not involved, basically are pushed to one side, you know. And so I think that was a very powerful way of kind of actually looking and beyond the edge and moving beyond the comfort zone as well. And sometimes like basically engaging beyond the edge will mean going out of your comfort zone. That doesn't necessarily mean, sometimes that can be a lot of effort, sometimes it can actually be made relatively easy, you know. And so this is an image of Birchfields Park in Manchester that Jane could tell you a lot more about than I can, but I've put it in here as an example of just looking at how like it's worth leaving space for the unexpected and the unplanned. So I was involved in discussing like the design of the forest garden a few years after it had been first been planted. And so we were looking at this space in the center and came up with all sorts of ideas of what could be put there in terms of seating, sculpture, structures, and so on. In the end, the decision was, well, actually, why not leave it open? And it, it feels really that was the best thing to do. And like just leaving the space as it is to have maximum versatility, maximum flexibility for use. And so people can come and have a picnic there, people can have celebrations there, do exercises, do play, all sorts of things are possible if we just create a forest garden with space in it, and I always say, like, when people ask me about designing forest garden, make space for people, leave space for people, just don't just whack it all full of plants, because a garden that has space for people is the garden that will be most appreciated. And which leads us to the final principle of learn and celebrate. And both learning and celebration, they're both expressions of and contributions to well-being, and so if we're looking here at this image, then we could probably think of quite a few things that are both being celebrated and being learned in this space. There's like seasonal harvest, there's kind of like the community, the use of like the simple technology to create useful products and so on, and a lot of the learning will go on informally, so learning doesn't have to be a signed up courses and such. A lot of learning happens by people just getting together, really. Great. And so to round this off, to reiterate what Nickie also already said in different words, that combination of community, forest, and garden, and the various benefits that each three bring, really creates something that is, again, bigger than the sum of its parts, and so in the forest garden we can have the benefits of all three of them. And here ends my little presentation, and I'll hand over to Paul, I think, who needs to unmute himself.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Richard and I have been working furiously going through your post-it notes, and we have the following themes, which I'm going to paste into the chat. We think that you can have a really valuable conversation, probably if there are about 3 or 4 of you in a group. So that gives 10 breakout groups. So what we've done is we've got 9 themes. One of them sounds very specific, but I think it's more of a sort of a medical one. So those of you with a medical persuasion may be attracted to those. So what we have here, if you can go into the chat, I've pasted them in, so you should be able to see it. So what we'll do, I think, is have a look there to see which one of those kind of broadly works for you. We did notice there were quite a few post-its about the situation in Wales, connecting in Wales and connecting with local health boards in Wales and so on, and GPs. So we've put a space for a Welsh group that might want to get together. There was a lot of energy around a 1,000-acre forest garden. And you'll notice that while there may be 10 breakout rooms, the 10th one is blank. If nothing that you see there in front of you suits you, you might want to encounter someone else in the 10th breakout room. But the choice is yours, okay?
Great. I think we're all back. Thank you for taking part in this experiment. So at this point, it would be good to have some feedback on, kind of like where you went with your discussion, and kind of maybe if from each group we should have that like asked you to elect a speaker within your groups. We missed that trick. So it probably end up being the person who is kind of most forward-coming, and we'll just have to deal with that. And so maybe just like give us like a minute's resume of where you went with it, and kind of what that is, and kind of did you use, if you used the Jamboard, let us know, because then we could potentially follow your train of thought on the Jamboard as well. So I suggest we just go through groups by number, by numbered theme, to make it easy for us. So group 1 was advice and mentoring from National Forest Garden and ways of connecting. There was Anne and Jake. So they're pointing at each other. So one of you has to unmute yourselves. Jake.
Oh, Anne.
We'll both do it. You start.
Basically, just what I found is that we're making really good connections, particularly in a safer space like the Zoom meetings and the breakout rooms in particular, because they're kind of smaller. But very often I'll just lose contact with people, and I think, oh, that'd be really good to talk to that person, and then I don't have a contact details for them, but I don't know them well enough to exchange contact details. And then that Lumio is good. It's as good as a forum, but it's not a brilliant place where you can just casually drop in and drop out. So it's just exploring different ideas about other bits of software to use, where you can have a group that that is open to people who come along to events like this, and then you can find other people as well. So someone say, oh, I can join this particular group, but there's no big, kind of load of email or anything. You can drop in and drop out as you please. And if you want to find somebody, it's much easier to find them because it's much more accessible. So that was a bit. Yeah,
great.
I won't talk about Scottish independence bit.
No, let's park that for another forum.
But also, the only other bit I would add was just to find people locally as well interested in this.
Yeah, thank you. So the national as well as the local. Yeah. So did we have anybody in group 2? I'm trying to remember.
Go on, Sharon.
Sharon Phillips, go on.
I can
say. Well, I think it wasn't so much about the funding we were talking about, it's more about the connections. Am I right, Joe?
Yes.
I mean, we've been successful in gaining some funding from the lottery, the National Reaching Communities funding, and also the local postcode trust for a horticultural therapist. Obviously, through COVID, we haven't been able to actually take up the posts, but I think it's looking at, it's great to get volunteers involved and the community, but that needs to be managed and it needs more funding, and it's looking at the opportunities for funding and how we get some more.
Okay, thank you. So group 3 was very well stocked, I saw. So would somebody dare to summarize what happened there? Don't be shy.
Well, we talked a lot about perhaps options for where we could find more information and where policy was based. specifically around well-being and healthy economists. And I was just gave some really good advice on about the benefits for proving clinical benefits, so clinically proven evidence. And I was just going to add on to that we've got to stay as well on the themes and because Victoria also mentioned about the other benefits perhaps we could capitalize on of facts that they're good at capturing or filtering pollution and biodiversity and sequestering carbon and just try and bring some of those things in a little bit. So try and connect it, because these are broader benefits that it might capture the imaginations of a broader field of people. Certainly people with developers or people who are planning a hospital might actually think, yeah, we really want this. And this also covers these other areas. And it's about just trying to find the evidence that can encourage people to see a broader field for what we're trying to create. So I was just thinking about that in regards to what research papers there are, but let's not be exclusively looking at the welfare and well-being, but look at other broader fields that could actually support the idea of bringing gardens in for that purpose of well-being.
Great, thank you. Did any of you take notes on that, or did you use the Jamboard for that? Because
I wrote what people said into the Jamboard.
Brilliant.
I don't know
Thank
if
you,
I got
Hannah.
all of it, but
that sounds really useful. So next group was getting children and young carers involved. I think I saw Mike and Debs in there. Do you want to give us a bit of a roundup?
So we've done so we invite people to come and have a look around and maybe make a herbal cup of tea. We've had open days.
I had a nice one.
So we've done fairies and elves, and we've done carding tales. We've done a jungle one with carving tales, and masks, den making, Alice in Wonderland, where teddy bears picnic. So we've done forage food tastes made for Alice in Wonderland, and we've always included permaculture, and we have a whole information on everything that's in the forest garden and the uses and what they're good for, like healing and uses and things like that people like to read. And then we'll do a demonstration of something like a no-dig garden. We've got a Kelly kettle. People can just pick things and bring them back and make a cup of tea. Yeah, we've done food brings people together. Oh, we've done teddy bears, a quiz for children and quiz for older ones. So go around and fight. So they're learning as well as being really hands-on. We found that people just want to come and help and join in. Because I think the first thing is people go, gardening? Can't garden, I can't grow anything. And it's not really about that, is it? It's
brilliant. Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a massive compendium of possibilities that you already explored. You know, I've had some of your tea and it was delicious. May be great if you could share some of that, maybe feed that into the mix.
I think I've got a whole resource file somewhere.
She was 40 years working with children. It shows, doesn't it?
Awesome. So the next group was the group 5. We didn't have any takers for, I believe. But then we had 1,000 acre forest garden, group 6. We had a couple of people in there.
5, 6, and 7 are empty.
I was in 6 for a bit.
Oh, okay.
Oh, for a bit.
We discussed where in the country there might be land for 1,000 acre forest garden. So we're discussing like what moorlands could be used for, or maybe down the central part of the Pennines, the very high part. What agencies or owners there were with the most land in the UK. That's about as far as we got, really.
Okay. Right. Okay. So, but then, yeah. So then, next group was 7. Paul, you're saying that was empty.
Next one is room 8, apparently. That's what's on
So
my screen anyway.
Learning, training, mentoring. So who was in that and could tell us something about that? Like somebody have a go. Who was in learning, training, and mentoring? No, nobody's admitting to that.
There's Eddie, Faye, Nigel, and Barra.
Have they gone?
No,
I just typed on chat room, but I remember one member has shared about his experience about in the garden have different groups that people will do different things. So it seems that it's take time and need communication, how they can compromise, or people have their own space, and also having recording how they had it before and now in the future, that they can really work it out together.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also think of about when people think of using forest garden, giving people well-being, how we can form our garden in a good shape. It's not only finding how we can plant the trees and have the harvest. I think the balanced ecosystem is also one of the things, how people, they can see the garden and they can helping the garden to create the equal balanced ecology, and then they can enjoy being there. Yeah. Someone, please.
Thank you. So learning about the ecology as well as like the productive uses. Yeah, great. And so the final group was group 9 on integrating green social prescribing with recovery. I see Carrie Scott posted from that group. So maybe Carrie, you want to take it away?
Thanks for that. I think the others can speak as well, definitely. Well, we've obviously, in respect to recovery, it was very broad in sense of post-COVID, social inequalities, and mental health and physical health. So it's kind of the whole gambit really of society and how it can be used and applied. A useful resource came up in terms of a test site for 7 sites across the country, funding given by the government in terms of social green prescribing. So that may be something to look out for in the next couple of years as to what their findings will be. But obviously there is a push for social prescribing anyway, so you know, maybe there will be more information. And also looking at, you know, so where's the blueprint for green, accessing green spaces in the context of health and well-being anyway? You know, where are the fundamentals in like the different services and to make sure it happens? So like NHS England Green Spaces strategy, you know, where's that leading to, and what's it going to look like, and how can we utilize it and make it happen? So yeah, that was kind of, I think, in a nutshell. But anyone else?
No.
Well, Perry, you were talking about you creating your own job description, wasn't it? Yeah, and that might be a useful resource for other people to follow suit. If you just want to maybe explain a little bit about what you're doing.
Generally, just to assist in a health trust to identify green spaces across the whole of the trust, and then apply that to a principle that, you know, access to therapeutic gains from green spaces should be available in all those across the whole trust, rather than this patchy approach to therapy. and that if there was a blueprint to this, and you know, can then be replicated, but obviously where you are building something in a local area, you're going to be addressing and using local people and ideas to make to formulate it, but at least to have the sort of the bare bones of it, you know, easily laid out and understood, so that you can replicate it in another area. So that's kind of what I'm working on. So let's see.
Brilliant.
I'll come back in 5 years. Tell you.
And maybe we could even get a couple of other people working with you on that in terms of in order to accelerate the work.
Yeah,
and
that'd be brilliant.
Like
yeah,
have the use of it.
Yeah, definitely.
Fabulous. That's
okay.
really great. I mean, I'm afraid we got nearly to 9 o'clock. So, and yeah, I mean, I don't feel empowered to kind of push us far beyond that. So maybe, I mean, there's a lot of really useful stuff in the chat as well. Have a flick through that and put your own tuppence worth in there as well, and that will be gathered. And Paul, I'll hand over to you again to say where we go from here, because we had some thoughts of kind of that this shouldn't be the end of it. We should extend the conversation beyond this series of seminars. So over to you, Paul. Oh, you need to unmute.
I wanted to thanks, Thomas. I wanted to pick up a couple of points briefly. One was about emails. How do I stay in touch? I think, Jake, it was you who raised that. I think if you want to use the private you know, messaging, the one-to-one messaging and through the chat to exchange your emails, that would be, I think, consistent with keeping us all private as private as we want to be. The other point was about lists of funds. I know people are very interested in funding, and please, you know, it's one thing I don't think we've done terribly well. We've put it up sort of piecemeal through Lumio, our chat forum, which is on the far right button on the website, by the way, if you want to join up. But if someone would love to volunteer and is good and keen and knows the funding landscape well, then we would dearly love you to volunteer to help us do that. So we have you know, we can keep everybody's radar alive with the latest opportunities. But generally speaking, and I've got to say a huge thank you, it isn't down to me at all. I'm sort of last in a way, to the rest of the team putting the seminar series together. But we have chosen to focus on well-being, and that seems to be a rich vein, and I think tonight's proved that. In fact, the whole seminar series has. But we have a short poll just to gauge how you might like to be involved, stay involved, or think about getting involved. So we'll just finish with that, if that's okay. And thank you for coming. One sec.
How do we do this, Paul?
Okay, can you see the poll?
It's Nickie here. I have launched it.
Oh, well done. Thanks, Nickie.
That's all right. People are providing feedback, so.
So how do I enter my opinion in this?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe you can't because you're a co-host.
No. Fair enough.
Well,
okay.
No. I don't know. I might have just made that up.
I'll give you my vote if you like, Thomas.
No.
I don't know how to share it though.
Keep your votes.
Can you not see it?
No need.
It's really encouraging to see how many of you want to be along at the next board meeting to discuss it. That's really wonderful.
Mm.
If you want us to keep in touch with you, I think the best thing to do is to put your email in the chat, particularly those who want to input either more generally or at the board meeting. But I'm going to hand back to you, Thomas, to do the close, since it's your show tonight.
Oh, well, it's been everybody's show, I think. And yeah, I mean, it's been a real delight and honor to be able to contribute to it tonight, and hopefully you gained some inspiration from it. Hopefully you kind of like, it leads you to further wanting to be involved with Forest Garden and make them useful, productive, creative spaces for health and well-being in the broadest sense. And very much encourage and invite you to stay connected, visit the website and join the Lumiere group if you're not on there yet. If you want to join the discussion, on the website you find the button on the top bar on the called forum, and that gets you in. And be in touch and share your stories. You know, it's been really, really fascinating, like over the whole series of these seminars, to hear how many great things are already happening and how much enthusiasm and desire there is to make more things happen. So thank you very much from me. And I mean, I don't think I have anything left to say.
Thank you.
So feel free to unmute yourself and say goodbye to each other.